Welcome to a new series of the Yahweh blog. I'm your host, Greg Wen. This is episode 1 of Chakmah Choter. It is actually an extension of our previous 2 series, one on the Choter, the other on the man from Edom. We are actually in what is a prelude to Yahweh's deployment of his son, Dode, as a prophet to introduce the Choter to us. And he does so around a word that he applies to him and to his wife, calling them particularly Chakmah, wise. And so I want to pick up where we left off at the end of our series on the man from Edom, when we turned to the second to the last of the prophets, Zechariah, which actually means memorable man. And when we turn to the 4th chapter, we're enveloped in a very interesting narrative, one that we will flesh out in its entirety at a different time, but we're going to begin it here. That speaks of a menorah, as you see over my shoulder here, assuming that we have it back. No, we don't, Leah, at least not that I can see. Well, there is a menorah behind me over on my right-hand side for certain. And on either side of this menorah were 2 olive trees. And we're told that the operative portions of those olive trees were stems off the main branch. Choteresque, if you will. And it is in this discussion that there is a spiritual messenger who is having a discussion with a prophet named Memorable Man or Memorable Men, Zechariah. So this is Zechariah speaking in first person. He said, "So then I responded by saying to the spiritual messenger, the Malach, who had spoken to me, to ask, 'Why are these here, sir?'" Speaking of these 2 olives, this trees that are not just rooted in the ground of Israel, signify long life, and the ones that produce the olives that would contribute not only to anointing oil, but to the oil lamps to illuminate God's people, to pierce the darkness, and to nourish them. A tree that is exceedingly important and productive in the land of Israel. And as we find out later, to the stems off the main branches of these trees on either side of Yahweh's ultimate symbol, his menorah. Why are these here? And the heavenly representative who had spoken with me answered, and he said to me, "Why do you not know, Yada, or understand? Why are you unaware what is being revealed to you, so that you can appreciate and acknowledge what these represent?" Mahem ele. I said, I just don't, sir. An honest discussion with a malach that is trying to do something that I think God wants all of us to do. Think it through. He doesn't want just to hand us the answers. There's no executive summary in the Torah prophets. There's no cliff notes to this. There's no simple outline you can follow. There is nothing for dumber. It's something that you've got to take the time to read, put the pieces together, and appreciate it. It's why these Yahweh blogs all average over an hour in length, and why there are so many of them, and we're just beginning, and why you see so many books on the shelf behind me. Well, the question is being posed, and these presentations, these symbols are being presented expressly for us to figure them out. And In this particular case, Yahweh had a reason to be a bit coy. If he simply said, well, this represents Yada, he is the Choter, and this other one represents Elia, he is the most sarcastic orator in Israel against religion and politics, then what would be learned by the branches, the olives, the fruit, the oil, their association with the menorah? And would Yahweh have put himself in a position where understanding this passage would have preceded the time that it would have done anyone any good? Coming before even the period where Yada would begin to write with passion about the things that Yahweh had revealed, or that even further in advance of Eliah's return. So he simply said, I do not. But it is the same question that I think Yahweh is asking his people today. Why are Jews so resistant to recognizing and accepting, well, his spiritual messenger today, his Malach, Yada? There is none other like him. And since he was announced by God by way of the Hebrew prophets, why not listen to his message, particularly since he is sharing Yahweh's prophetic pronouncements with them? Why not pay attention to his voice, since Yahweh says that he will speak through him? After all he's trying to do is get their attention and offer Yisrael something wonderful, reacquaint Yehudim with Yahweh. He is asking nothing in return, already having invested 24 years in research, having this wealth of books behind me, all free, even making it convenient now with the Yahweh blog. So please, Israel, come to know Yada, appreciate why he was sent, understand what he and Eliah will ultimately represent. The final witnesses will have been dispatched to convey the very word of God. And so those standing on either side of the menorah, they're messengers. Of course, they're not trees. They have been sent to speak out against Zerubbabel, who is the Lord of confusion, and indeed Satan's spawn. Then he answered and said to me, this is the word of Yahweh against Zerubbabel, the nauseating seed of the Lord, and the contentious confusion sown by Babylon's propensity to commingle. It is to say, not by might, ability, or wealth, and not with force or authority, but in actuality with my spirit, declares Yahweh of the vast array of spiritual messengers. And so here, the Malach is speaking for Yahweh, and he is quite clear. He says that this message, this word of Yahweh, is going to be against the seed of Babel, Zerubbabel. This is the Lord of confusion. This is the propensity to integrate religion and politics. This is the tendency to bolster a lie by integrating elements of the truth. For example, was there a Messiah in the Torah and prophets? Well, not in the Torah, but certainly in the prophets, right? There is a Messiah. Is that Messiah coming again? Well, not under the term Messiah, but he is certainly coming again relative to the term entitled king. Son of God, Savior. There is a God. He revealed himself to us through his prophets. So they misappropriate prophecies. They apply them errantly. They misquote them. But they take just enough to create some credibility for their lies. This is the nature of Babel. It's confusion by intermixing. So, if you tell somebody, Dode is the Messiah, he is the Son of God, he is the returning king, he is our Savior, he's the one who came in 33 CE, and he's returning in 2033 as king. And they will say, well, what about the prophecies of a returning Messiah? And you say, there are no prophecies about a returning Messiah. There's a prophecy about a Messiah, and that individual is returning, not once, but twice. But you see what you've done when you make it sound like, well, there's somebody is supposed to be called a Messiah that's supposed to come, and he's prophesied. There is no such prophecy. It's replacement foolology, as I call it. Or you look at the Quran, and it's filled with Babylonian Talmud recitals that are all just twisted and perverted to suit Allah's and Muhammad's situation. No longer any credibility. And so the great battle today is against this commingling of truth and lies, the basis of progressive politics, the basis of conspiracy theories, the basis of MAGA, literally the basis of Christianity and of Islam and of Judaism. Oh, speaking of Christianity, we did get some good news. The communist, anti-Semitic Pope is dead, but we have some bad news, which is that they will be choosing another one, and he won't be any better. Yeah. And we do have some good news, though, which is this will be the last Pope. And so we're very soon going to know, assuming that this next Pope lasts for 8 years, that this is going to be the Pope that is so active in supporting the Torahless one, the corporeal manifestation of Hasatan. So it will be really interesting to watch the developments, just to find out what kind of scumbag they choose for this role. And there really is nothing more Babylonian in religiosity than would be the Roman Catholic Church. It's, when Gabriel, who is David, speaks about this progression from beast to beast, he begins in Babylon and he ends with the Roman Catholic Church. So this is the enemy that the witnesses will be confronting. And Wookie, this is probably not the best place for you, buddy. I know you want to do the show, but there we go. You can just hang on right where you were. Well, Wookiees will be Wookiees. You see, now there's a monitor here, and Wookie, of course, sees himself in it. And Wookie has a thing that there's only one male dog allowed in this household. And there's another one, looks just like him, however, on the screen. Counterfeits. They will fool you every time. So it says it is not by might, by ability or wealth, and not by force or by authority. And this is profound, because what it says is those who claim to be authorized, Roman Catholic Church, for example, Orthodox popes and Roman Catholic popes, they say, no, it's not them. Not people who win presidential elections or become prime minister. It's not with the authority of man. It's not with personal qualifications. It's not militarily by how many battle groups and aircraft carriers can you project, how many B-2 bombers can you fly. It's not that's going to get it done. It's not the IDF, even in Israel, that's going to get this done. Not by physical might, not by wealth. It's certainly not going to happen on behalf of the richest among us. No. God's going to prevail by empowering his witnesses with his Spirit. And that is vastly more enriching, more empowering, more enabling than all of the armies that ever marched and all of the money ever made, more than all of the authority ever assumed. It's going to be by his Spirit. Now, when you hear something like that, then the thing you have to do immediately is say, all right, I was talking about the last days, because this is when those two witnesses are going to stand on either side of the menorah. And when that occurs, he's saying that the distinguishing factor is going to be Yahweh's Spirit. So who did Yahweh say is going to be equipped with his Spirit, with the Spirit of Yahweh plus the Spirit 7 times over in terms of capabilities to reveal a message at this time? The Choter, and only the Choter. He is the last person that we are told is going to be enabled by the Spirit of Yahweh, and in his case, very uniquely, the 7 spirits of Yahweh, including the title spirit of this series, which is Chakmah, wisdom, followed by Bien, understanding. The spirit of being able to put the whole story together is I was the first to do from beginning to end. The spirit of boldness and just flat out ability to get this job done. Courage, to compassion, to see it through. The spirit of Dayat, which is just knowledge. So the knowledge that is stored in these books behind me, that has really become part of me over these past 24 years. The spirit of reverence and respect for Yahweh. And so when he says that this job will be done by his Spirit in conjunction with his menorah and in harmony with a stem off of the main branch, which we read further in Zechariah, well, the stem off the main branch is the Choter. The person that has the 7 spirits of Yahweh is the Choter. That person who writes the Nesh, which is the banner, which Yahweh also says here in Zechariah, memorable man, he's going to actually lift up and extend. It's the Choter. And guess what the Choter's name is? Yada. The very name that was given right at the beginning of all of this. So it is a pretty overt declaration that this messenger will be the Choter. There is even 2 other affirmations here. One affirmation is this menorah, the one that's sitting on the shelf, the one that's turning here above me. Because we had done all of this work under a stylized lion representing Dod, our king, Lion of Judah. And Yahweh, one day in December, came to me and said, we're going to change that. You're going to be speaking now to the illumination and in conjunction with my menorah. Change it. Okay, got it. Menorah. Back to the menorah. Well, why? Well, he just told us. The 2 witnesses speak alongside Yahweh's menorah. So if you're going to be one of the 2 witnesses, you need to change your symbol to God's symbol and the chosen symbol at this time, which is the menorah. And oh, by the way, what harvest is the most important ingathering associated with the Choter, with Yada? with the final Zeroah, with Dod's Bashar. It's an olive harvest, isn't it? Teruah. And so what kind of trees are these? They're olive trees. God laid it all out. That's one of the reasons he asked Zechariah, why don't you understand here? And to be all in fairness, Zechariah was probably revealed right around 500 BCE. Yeshaya 11, yeah, that was revealed around 750 BCE. And so 150 years he would have had to study the prophecy in Yeshaya. And as we're soon to find out, Isaiah wasn't the first one to introduce the Choter. I had thought that was the introduction, and that what he had to say about the Choter was the textbook on how to perform in this role and how one should respond to them and how one goes about compiling this Nesh banner that God's going to lift up, and how you go about conveying the wisdom and understanding and complete knowledge that Yahweh is enabling through his 7 spirits, through the Choter, so that you can deliver this message boldly, courageously, compassionately, effectively. And the result is a growing reverence for Yahweh and his name. I thought that was the introduction to it, but it's not. Nope. 250 years, maybe even closer to 300 before Yeshaya was inspired to write those words in the 11th chapter of Isaiah. David, spoke vociferously about the Choter, and also the Choter situation and the situation with his wife. It's riveting. I mean, just as Isaiah in the 17th chapter reveals that there is this connection between the olive harvest, that the person named Crag is, as the final Zeroah, orchestrating the Teruah ingathering, is going to be responsible as the productive man of the earth, the Adamah Parah, and actually saving this remnant of Israel. Well, it turns out that wasn't original. Dode explained it in the 14th Mizmor. It's quite a story. So Yahweh had already laid all this out. He knew Zechariah was an exceedingly bright man that had read from the Torah and the prophets up to this point. And the Malach conveying the message knew that he could have figured it out. And perhaps he didn't figure it out for the same reason that, well, I didn't figure it out until years had gone by, because it takes building a very solid foundation of knowledge and then processing that knowledge intelligently, and then making the necessary connections to understand and seeing the whole picture from beginning to end, that one can deduce these conclusions. Chakmah is a process. It's not an instant thing. And so, since we were told by Yeshaya that the Choter, which is both a rod of divine judgment as well as a fruitful branch of an olive tree, would be the one imbued with the 7 Ruach spirits of Yahweh, and that he would be emboldened and authorized to speak forcefully on God's behalf at this time, then clearly he is one of the 2 witnesses. The other witness, I think, was obvious all along, but in case you didn't figure it out, in the last chapter of the last book that Yahweh would convey to humankind, Malachi, also named my spiritual witness, he would name the other one Eliah, but it should have been obvious. Eliah was was removed after doing the very thing that's going to be required of the witnesses, exposing and condemning religion and politics of his people. And he is most famous for orchestrating the great explosion of fire and water around the carcass of a sacrificial bull, which ties directly into the story of the Adamah Parah and the events of Teruah, 10 days before Dod's return. All of the elements are there for us to figure it out. Just as all the elements were there for us to realize that David is the Messiah, Son of God, who is the returning king, who in his second of 3 lives fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Makodim. He announced it in first person 1,000 years before he endured all of this. It was always there for us. And God has a very different view of us than does Hasatan. Hasatan taunts us. He'll say that something is halal, and that would be good in Islam, and yet it's Satan's first name. According to Isaiah in the 14th chapter, it's Halal bin Shakar, Satan's name. Just taunting us. He'll have his most effective witness ever, Satan's advocate, Paul, admit to being demon-possessed, and in his first encounter with him, actually cite the line from Dionysus upon whom the Christian Jesus was developed beyond even the counterfeit of Dode. And he would pilfer a line from Dionysus. I mean, you can't be any more obvious. In the Quran, jinn, demons say, hey, the Quran's really good. We just love this Allah guy. And Muhammad, wow, he is a speaker of truth. And the Quran even says that all of Allah's messengers speak on behalf of Satan. Satan's in our face. He just thinks we're really stupid. God doesn't. God thinks we're smart. He thinks we're capable of figuring it out. And so he leaves a lot of things for us to figure out. And maybe that's the reason I got this job. I'm a pretty good figure outer. When it comes to putting together the jigsaw puzzles, I've got a system. I'm good at it. And when the jigsaw puzzles are comprised of the words of God, I don't think anyone has ever been as skilled at it, including Dode, including Moshe. I'm not saying that arrogantly. I'm just telling you that I've read everything that Dode has said. I've read everything that Moshe has said many times over. And I know that in these books behind me, there are thousands of insights that even they didn't share. They gave all the information necessary to deduce them, but they didn't profess them. So we're dealing with the Choter. And wouldn't it be interesting to note that is, we go one step further. Beyond the fact that Yada has Yahweh's explicit authorization and the enablement of his 7 spirits, that no one in all of human history has gone so far as to expose and condemn the 3 Abrahamic religions. From Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, having written the 3 volumes of Babel to denounce Judaism, the 5 volumes of Christianity to prove emphatically 1,000 times over that Christianity is completely false and there was no Mr. Christ. And of course, to utterly repudiate every nuance of Islam, from Allah's protestation that he is a god to Muhammad's claim that he was a prophet, or that Islam is anything more than a death cult. 5 volumes there too. 4,200 pages, over 3,000 pages, 2,500 pages, It's a lot of material. No one's ever done that before. And in every case, I used the religious scriptures to indict the religion, comparing what they claimed to what God actually said. No one had done that before. I am the ultimate sleuth when it comes to exposing and condemning Babel. No one has ever done it as completely. No one has ever done it as effectively. No one has ever done it as irrefutably. And not even close. So when it comes to the seed of Babel, Zerubbabel, I'm not only your guy. You have to think it through just a moment. Where did God ask me to start? The most satanic of all religions, Islam. And then to go from there to the next most satanic, Christianity. And no one has written books called Babel, based upon Babylon, on the revelations that Satan inspired in Babylon, particularly the first half of Daniel and the entirety of the book of Ezekiel, proving emphatically that the first half of Daniel and the entirety of Ezekiel is Babylonian and not of Yahweh. Goddamn religion, Twistianity, and Babel. And I have done so without any financial compensation, which fits this prophecy, without any assistance from anyone in a position of authority, ever. And so Yada, as the Bashar, the herald, the Malak, spiritual messenger, Zeroah, one cultivating the seeds of Yahweh's harvest, Kol, voice of God, and Choter, this stem off the olive, continues to fit the billing. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this to listen. Up to the point of the messenger's question, Zechariah had been shown a menorah and 2 olive trees, both of which he would have understood, including the connections between them. What oil does that menorah burn to create its light? Olives, right? Furthermore, his interjection of the priestly head wrap into the previous vision, where he said, "Oh, now I get it. Yahusha, the high priest, he is way too degraded, too perverted, too filthy to serve in the role that is needed to fulfill Yom Kippurim, to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. He's way too big a scumbag for that. So, God, you have your solution, the ultimate qualification, man with the best resume in the history of humankind, dude. So let me go get the headband," he said. So Zechariah is a smart man. We're dealing with a well-read, bright individual who was chosen expressly because he was a quick study. He would have had access to all the revelations of the prophets, with the exclusion of Malachi. One of the oldest scrolls in Qumran, however, dating to the 2nd century BCE, suggests that Zechariah could have even been the last of them, because it includes all of the so-called minor prophets, with Zechariah's revelations positioned not before, but after Malachi's, at the end of the scroll. Therefore, since he would have been intimately familiar with the design and message of the menorah and would have understood its association with the olives, his question would not have been, "What are these?" but instead, Why are these being presented to me, and who do they represent? From this perspective, we are aware that in Malachi's revelation, only one of the two witnesses is listed. And he is the one being sent to awaken Israelites from their slumber, just as Zechariah had been aroused from his sleep with the arrival of the spiritual messenger. And so, with this in mind, and considering Zechariah's inherent aptitude, he was likely asking, why are these here? He wanted to know the reason there were two olive trees witnessing on either side of God's luminary, his menorah, representing not only the seven spirits of Yahweh, but the seven Moed Mikre. Now, before we consider the Malak's answer, remember, Zechariah is the same fellow who interjected himself into the previous narrative, telling the Malak to include the head wrap. And I know the Torah as well, but I'm going to tell you, I didn't make that connection until after the Spirit pointed me to Kara for the answer. And for Zechariah to have deduced this in the moment, well, that means that he actually understood the intent of the vision, while also being so confident in his assessment that he would complete the scene while in Yahweh's presence. That says our prophet is exceedingly well informed, that he is very intelligent, and that he's quite confident in his reasoning. Now, based upon his desire to follow Yahweh's words to their intended conclusion, Zechariah would have been familiar with Yashaya's prophetic presentation of the Choter, who is the secondary branch of that olive tree, a productive sucker that gives the stump of fallen Yisrael new life, and the rod of divine judgment. With an entire chapter focused upon him and the role that he would eventually play, the prophet would have understood that Yahweh intended to enlighten and empower, equip, and embolden the Choter with his spirit so that he could compose this Nesh banner that God would raise up on behalf of his people. And he knew that the first 10 chapters of Yashaya are focused on exposing and condemning Israel's propensity to be religious. Therefore, he would have surmised that it would not have been by physical might, by a person's independent ability, or by great wealth, nor through armies, religion, politics, any claim to authority, and not through status or personal qualifications, but instead, it would be through the Ruach's collaboration with the Choter that would bring new life to the olive tree in time for the final gleaning, of course, of olives during Yom Teruah. That being so, it explains why the Malak realized that Zechariah should have perceived the connection with Yada. And the heavenly representative who had spoken with me answered, and he said to me, why do you not recognize Yada or know what these represent? The answer was provided by Dode, clearly, emphatically, demonstrably, in the 14th Mashal proverb. It was Dode that identified the Choter as Yada. It was Dode that made the connection between the Choter and Chakmah. That was the first of the independent spirits that Choter is being offered, independent by saying that the first spirit is the spirit of Yahweh. The next spirit listed, Ruach of Chakmah. It is the only other time, and the totality of Yahweh's Torah, prophets, and Mizmor, that the Choter is mentioned by Dod and then by Yashayah. Therefore, the spiritual messenger who was already duly impressed by listening in during Zechariah's previous session with Yahweh, well, he expected a similar response, knowing not only what Dod had written, but that Zechariah would have read it. Now, as we consider our king's introduction to the Choter, a treatise scribed 3 centuries before Yashayah's dissertation on this same subject, we find that it begins where we, without context, would least expect, in a quarrel between women. In a quarrel between women. The one building up and establishing her home and her family, even that of her people, because she is Jewish, is presented as exceptionally thoughtful and wise, properly instructed and astute. And as it would transpire, she is the Choter's wife. Of course, she is the product of an arranged marriage of Yada to Yisrael by way of Yahweh. And of course, she's Jewish, where the evil woman is not. But the evil woman covets her position, and even more than that, covets disparaging her, just as Miriam sought to disparage Moshe's wife so that she could claim the ability, the authority to also speak for God, which is exactly the same situation we have here. As a matter of fact, when this disgusting rebellion came back online after being dark for 2 months, they had a featured article right out of Zechariah, claiming that my wife was the evil one destined to hell. Oh, yes, we have a battle royale, just as Dod recognized. He also realized that there is no one actually more important to him as a human than his Bashar, this Choter, because Dod accomplished the greatest feat in human history, working with Yahweh to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, but no one noticed. He wrote all about it. And no one paid any attention. As a matter of fact, rather than giving him credit for what he had done, they denounced him, buried him, even said he wasn't even in heaven. And then, both in Judaism and in Christianity, they promoted crude counterfeits in his place. And the first person, the only person to recognize that and to base his entire message on reintroducing God and his son to his people is this Choter. So he became really important to Dod. And you know something that's really important to Dod? Women. And when he saw someone come after my wife, just as he had to deal with a family rebellion that almost took out his entire ministry in his first life, Dod was the first person to say, no, you're not doing that. I'm here to denounce it. Profoundly important. So that you know, I met a woman named Lisa, who I renamed Leah at her request. She didn't choose the name, I chose it. But she says, I don't want to be known by my old name. I want a new name. Give me a new name. And I renamed her Leah because Leah is the mother of God's people. She is the mother of Yahudah. And I wanted to right a wrong because Leah was not appreciated by Jacob. I wanted to change that because she should have been. Now I met Lisa, who I renamed Leah, and I also offered her what I thought and what she seemed to think was a better last name, Wynn, my own. We met 15 years ago online. Yeah, not at a dating site, however. We met online because she read my books. And when she did a search, she was doing a search for, who is this woman? This very woman that is introduced to us in this mashal. Who is this woman? Both the good one and the bad one. Yeah. And so she wrote me and said, you seem to be the only person that is explaining the female references when God brings them up. So I know there's a connection between Ruach and feminine and a good woman and a bad woman here in these stories, and you're writing about them and no one else will. That's how we met 15 years ago. And from that point on, we exchanged a cerebral, intelligent email once a week where she would send me an email and says, well, I agree with what you wrote here, here, and here. I don't so much agree with here, but over here, why didn't you mention this? Or I can add that. And man, there was no one that could find the details better than Leah. So she was directed to it while searching to properly identify the wise woman. It was presented in this prophecy. After spending every waking hour reading all of my books cover to cover at that point, there was probably 10 of them by that time, maybe 12. She sent me an email asking why I, as a goy, was devoting myself to translating Yahweh's testimony on behalf of Yehudim. Why would any goy do that? Goy are supposed to be bad. At this point, she knew that rabbis were bad, so it wasn't, being good company, I expect. And she evidently appreciated my answer because I was honest with her. And we would go on to exchange hundreds upon hundreds of intellectually stimulating emails over the years, one or more a week for almost 10 years before we met. Turns out our king was writing about the value of our relationship and how it would serve to reestablish and restore Israel prior to the Messiah's return. You see, it's something most people don't know. The primary role of this Choter, this man from Edom, isn't just to reintroduce Yahweh's name. It isn't even to restore Dod's reputation as our Savior, the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, although those are really worthy endeavors. It's not only to write these volumes here behind me, 35 books, not to deliver the Yahweh blog. It's not even to conduct the Shabua or the Teruah in-gatherings, although that's part of the mission and the role. No, you see, the single most important act for the Choter, this final Zeroah named Yada, is to offer his life as the Adamah Parah, the bloody red man of the earth, who is productive as a bull. And he is the Adamah Parah, that is the red heifer that is sacrificed to cleanse and prepare the adulterous woman that is Israel. So that the groom in that story, who wants his wife back, is Dode David. Israel is being prepared to be betrothed to her king. And the implement that makes that possible, that prettiers her up, that gets her out of the muck and mud of religion. Same guy. This Choter, whom Dode is not only introducing, but introducing in context with defending his wife from attack. Because it is my job to prepare his bride for the ultimate family reunion, an act of reconciliation on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliation. These things are all tied together. Yes, our king was writing about the value of our relationship and how it would serve to reestablish and restore Yisrael prior to his return. Leah's counterpart is the conniving woman who tries to break the covenant family apart and to destroy it. And in this regard, she's very good at being bad. Now, she is a certified psychopath, clinically diagnosed, so you might expect that. And I came to know her when she was part of a conspiracy cult, and obviously she's never left it. She orchestrated an exceedingly vicious rebellion against me in the same way that Miriam challenged Moshe, which began by slandering his wife and now my wife. Prior to her bitter departure, this evil woman oversaw social media, which is something I avoided like the plague. But just like Miriam brought Aaron with her, the wily psychopath lured my webmaster and also my publisher away with her, while claiming that she spoke for Spirit Mom because, well, she was looking for a role that she could claim as herself, and she's the Spirit Mom. Her justification was the 8th mashal, word picture, proverb of Dode. Foolishly, she postured that it was the voice of her spiritual mother, whom she claimed I had ignored, requiring her and her groupies to break away and such that they could speak for her. Otherwise, everyone was going to die. But in actuality, I had been the first to have written exclusively about how the Ruach as a feminine noun conveyed the more feminine and maternal aspects of Yahweh's decidedly masculine and paternal nature. And in fact, I had gone too far in overstating the potential implications of the Ruach spirit being a feminine noun. And the fact that I was the first to do it is the very reason that Leah wrote me in the first place. Yeah, the premise was an outright lie. But that's what deceivers do. Further, the 8th mashal proverb, well, it doesn't even mention the Ruach. Ruach's not to be found anywhere in the words. It doesn't mention an M, mother. Nope. In it, Dode speaks of the benefits of being Chakmah, wise, using the feminine word for intelligence, which is the first of the spirits ascribed to the Choter, and the very accolade that's ascribed to the Choter's wife, Leah. Regardless of the false pretenses associated with their departure and their errant perceptions, It was quite disruptive. They took a number of people with them, people who I now have absolutely no respect for, because when they came back to light, they've gone dark again, of course. Their featured teaching was a condemnation of my wife. And so all of you scum that are hanging along with her, you can all wallow in it. Wear it. It is your leprous apparel. I asked Yahweh for advice. I'd never experienced anything quite like that, although the very conspiracy cult that this woman had come out of, or claimed to have come out of years ago, that she was the chief disciple, that they also led a rebellion. So she was practiced. And guess what? For years, maybe even all the way to now, the leader of that cult claims to be, he's the truther. I think it was Uncomfortable Truth or some kind of truth was the name of their website. Facebook, Unpopular Truth was the name of their Facebook page. Facebook, of course. And of course, that is what they're claiming of themselves now. And he would go on to cite my translations as his own, which is exactly what was happening at this other site. They were wearing me like a skin. They even changed from having a beehive and honeycomb being their symbol to copying the menorah that God asked us to change to. They used in their title and in their web page the transliteration of Yahweh's name that I was the first to deduce, even though in their own text they changed Yahweh's name so that he could have a split personality between mommy and daddy. And they copied my translation style, which was completely unique to me and what I have done for Yahweh. All to wear me like a skin, just like in Christianity, the fake Jesus wears Dode like a skin. Just like the wolf comes dressed as the sheep. Yahweh's instructions to me when I asked him for advice were immediate and clear. Rebrand everything under his name, Yahweh, which they changed to. It was always Shamar Torah, became Yahweh. Changed to his menorah. They changed their logo to a menorah. Trash everything that had been done on social media and start completely over. And go from full-time translator and writer to video blogger, speaking directly to his people, recognizing that I had come to embody all that had been written in these books. And of course, now they have a video blog. Yeah, pure counterfeit from beginning to end, the nature of all religious scams. Then God told me to not only let the prior players go, but that he was providing a new and far more capable team. But that I would find instructions, he told me, for dealing with this challenge in Bamidbar, Numbers 12, which is the story of Miriam's rebellion. And it is an absolute perfect fit. It makes absolutely no difference in the rendition of the Torah as it was lived by Moshe and the children of Israel. It doesn't really add anything to that story other than know only Moshe spoke for God and that God is emphatic about it. But that whole story was revealed for this day as an answer to this problem, because that's where it makes the most sense. And that is why the story is told the way it is, because even if when you look at that story, when Miriam, which means embittered, contentious, rebellious, approached Moshe, she did the same thing. She disparaged Moshe's wife. And when Yahweh confronted them, guess what he didn't even mention? Moshe's wife. He went right to the actual purpose of trying to challenge Moshe, was to be able to claim that she too spoke for God. And God was so angry about it. He said, even if your father spit in your face, I would lambaste you with this because you're revolting. And no, you don't. This known, Dode introduced Yada as the Choter prophetically, revealing that he had also perceived what Yahweh had foretold in the Torah in Numbers 12. It reads, the wisest and most astute, Chakmah, the thoughtful and prudent, the most skillful and capable, the properly instructed and learned, the most knowledgeable, discerning, and perceptive, a plural adjective of women, saying that all of these attributes belong to her, of females. She builds up and establishes. She bana. She creates and constructs. She restores and reestablishes. She perpetuates and fortifies. She makes abundantly prosperous her home and her family. What is the family that Dode cares about? Yehudim, Yisrael. And so for this to apply to you, what do you have to be? Yehud. You have to be an Israelite. My wife is. The rival is not. So the wisest and most astute of women, she builds up and she establishes her home and her family. While the foolishly conniving woman, the impious, seeking preeminence, who is adverse to understanding and thoughtlessly quarrelsome, while more evil than even stupid. This is I willeth. Very similar to the pronunciation in the singular that we would ascribe to evil. I willeth. So the foolishly conniving woman, the impious woman that is seeking preeminence, who is adverse to understanding and thoughtlessly quarrelsome, and even more evil than she is stupid, tears it down and is ousted from it, doing so with her own hands, on her own initiative, through her influence over others. Mashal, word pictures, Proverbs 14:1. Dode's introduction to his treatise on the Choter not only paints a prophetic picture of our current situation, it reinforces the value of Chakmah, of being thoughtful and astute, discerning and perceptive when it comes to reestablishing the family of God through the covenant. He contrasts these productive attributes, which serve to build up Yahweh's family, with the destructive nature of being Ilaluth, thoughtlessly quarrelsome and conniving, trying to achieve preeminence, which is exactly what Miriam was attempting to do with Moshe. And it leads to harass, breaking apart, and ousting family members. Boy, is that ever the truth. Turned out exactly that way. Lesson learned, lesson taught by the greatest of students who became the most acclaimed of teachers. The reason that I have concluded that Bamidbar 12 and Mashal 14 are prophetic of our situation, it's not only because they are completely analogous. They both begin with a contentious and embittered woman threatening the wife of Yahweh's chosen implement at a time where conveying his message is essential to the survival of his people. The one conveying his message to his people at that time was Moshe. Today, it is Yada. And yet, after this ploy is introduced, nothing more is said regarding the wives. The nature of their disagreement is not mentioned. The narratives turn immediately to Yahweh's instructions regarding his first and final conveyor of his cold voice. And while it is imprudent to quarrel with or to compete against either of them, we're also afforded another affirmation of the synergy between the two presentations of the Choter, because immediately after revealing that the Ruach of Yahweh would support him, we find that he would be given, the Choter's case in Yeshaya 11, what? Chakmah, wisdom. So here, Chakamoth, which addresses that all the many things associated with Chakmah in this plural, it's germane to building up and restoring the covenant family. So Dode introduces the purpose of it. Oh, and what was that mashal that they used to justify their rebellion and their desertion and their claims that they too spoke for God because they would be saving many by explaining how Mashal 8 speaks of Spirit Mom, when it in fact speaks of Chakmah. And they weren't Chakmah enough to recognize it. Turns out, many of those who perceived that they were covenant based upon a shallow interpretation of what I, as Yada, had written, were overcome by jealousy and they were beguiled into rebellion. They found my wife easy to hate. They weren't Jewish, she was. They weren't married to me, she was. They had no idea how hard it is to be married to me, but nonetheless, she was, they weren't. She was mentioned in the Torah and prophets, they were not. She contributed mightily to these books that I have written, helping me to focus on what really matters, building up God's family, his people. And according to Haras, they have written themselves out of God's story. They're no longer part of the covenant family. And deservedly so. They were all whispering their hatred of my wife. For years. And then given the opportunity to be part of a cult where she is publicly disgraced for, by the way, everything they had to say about her, I've got a copy of it now. Everything they had to say about her is actually, when you know the truth, it's lovely. But they, in the manner of all deceivers, turned something that was very, very good to make it sound bad. It's repulsive, by the way. And what was really interesting is the way that we came to know that they had written this diatribe trying to condemn my wife to hell is that there's a woman who's she's had her challenges, and she was vulnerable. She's been vulnerable for a long time. She's gone through a lot of very difficult situations. I'm not going to mention her name. But rather than having the character to man up, or woman up in this case, and say, this is what we think about your disgusting wife and why she is the evil woman who is destroying your credibility. And therefore, we have to jump in and speak for God because this woman is so evil and she's the one who has brought you down to hell with her. They sent this woman off. They actually wrote her letter. Yeah, she called my wife and says, please, I want you to know I didn't write those things. It was the psychotic woman that was the head of this cult that wrote them. And they wrote them for her to deliver, knowing that the last thing that I would want to do is to go after this woman who's already had so much in her life that has gone against her. And so I didn't. I kept quiet for over a month. And then she called and she said, I didn't write it. The psychopath wrote it. That's how reprehensible they are. That's why I have no sympathy for those who were lured into that disgusting cult. That's why God doesn't. That's why Doe doesn't either. And should you think, and some people did, very few, but there were people back in the day when I first began to do these things and they became so vicious. They're just exceedingly demeaning. I mean, thoughtlessly, moronically demeaning. That we ought not be speaking of a fractured family. But that's the whole story. That is God's story from beginning to end. It's a fractured family. He reached out to Abraham and Sarah, and they screwed up everything right at the beginning. And then you look at Yishak. It wasn't much better. God had to say, no, not that one, this one. And then you look at Jacob, and, he says, I want that one. God says, no, it's going to be this one. He couldn't even get it right. And he just blundered through it most of his life. It was awful. And then you look at the 12 sons, and they go into scheming mode immediately. Talk about a fractured family. They sell one of their own into slavery. I mean, the whole story is fractured family. And then you look at Moshe. He is given up by his mother, floated down the Nile, picked up and taken into Pharaoh's house. He's now in a second household. He's being raised by the ultimate enemy of his people, the one enslaving his people. He finally breaks free of that and says, I shouldn't be doing this. Went to defend his kin, and they turn on him. You can't have a more dysfunctional family. And then God says, hey, we're going to go rescue him. He says, hell no, I'm not going over there to rescue them. Are you kidding? The last time I tried that, it turned out really badly. Certainly you know that. No, these people, they're terrible. And what happened? They didn't even get to the Red Sea, and they were already saying, we want to go back. We want to be abused. We're happier being abused because we're abusive. They were just nothing but irascible children. And it isn't long into the story that Moshe goes to God and said, what in the hell did you do here? You made this a mess. This is an impossible job. These people are impossible. I want nothing to do with this. I want out. The whole story, the waters of Meribah, the meltdown of Miriam. You know who Miriam was when she tried to revolt against Moshe and condemn him because of his wife? And who Aaron was that came along with her to claim that they too spoke for you? Was his brother and sister. The whole story is about fractured families. Why does God tell Hosea to go marry a goddamn temple prostitute, a religious whore? Why does he say, you're not my children anymore? Why does he say, I'm divorcing you? The whole story from beginning to end is a fractured family. And just as Yahweh asked Hosea to marry a temple prostitute so that he could empathize what Yahweh was having to endure with Israel, you can't do this job unless you've experienced the same. You have to live in a fractured family. You have to experience it both spiritually and physically to be able to identify with what God's doing so that you can speak with passion, with empathy, not just with intelligence to his people. Sometimes I get all worked up because I've got it here and here, because I've experienced it here and here. Just as Yahweh has, just as Moshe did. Just look at Dod. His eldest son rapes his daughter. Absalom then kills his eldest son. If that weren't bad enough, Absalom gets the children of Israel to rise up against Dod, leads a rebellion against him. And Dod falls apart over all of this. Fractured families. That's the story. Why do you think that the homecoming is called the Day of Reconciliations? Duh. Why is the story of the Adamah Parah and Numbers, and also the story of the adulterous woman, and the cure for the adulterous woman is the story that's being described about the red heifer and the Adamah Parah? And why is there a groom that's not named, but that's obviously the returning king of Israel, Dod, who wants his bride back, but she's too scummy? Fractured family. But it's the answer to Yahweh having divorced Israel. Now it's time for Dod as the king to betroth them, but somebody's got to fix them. Why do you think Dod's reaching out to support the wise woman against the evil woman here? Because he sees the same fracture that needs to be solved. And he's supported because if we don't prevail, it's all for nothing. There is no cure for the adulterous woman. Why do you think the covenant is a family? What do you think God is telling us to walk away from the family of man? The whole story comes together in this portrait. This is not some little detail that we should overlook. It is the essence of the story. It is what we're here to resolve. And it is that contrast that you must understand if you're going to benefit from what God is offering. Yep, turns out. So many of those who thought that they were covenant based upon what now is obvious was a very shallow interpretation of what I had written. Well, they were overcome with jealousy. They were beguiled by an exceedingly evil and destructive woman into rebellion. And according to Haras, they have now written themselves out of the covenant family. As children of Israel, you've done the same thing. You're Miriam. You had the meltdown of the waters of Meribah. Same exact word, isn't it? You are Miriam. You are the adulterous woman. You need to come clean. The door for the covenant swings both ways. If you want to remain in the covenant, you have to remain in the covenant. If you want to be part of God's family, you need to act that way. You cannot go against it. If you want to be part of the solution, you cannot be part of the problem. The intelligent know how that door opens, where to go to it, how it leads inside, while the conniving and foolish are locked outside. With the stage set now and the family instructed, Dod turns to the man who is the man of the hour. He isn't of Dod's status, doesn't want to be. He is the lesser luminary that reflects the greater luminary's light. It reads, "He who walks with integrity and what he knows to be right, respects and reveres Yahweh. But the devious one, having departed by misleading others, going the wrong way along an errant path, disregards and shows contempt for him, which is precisely what they have done. Mashal, word pictures, Proverbs 14:2. In our review of Yeshaya's testimony on the Choter, we found that after he was afforded the spirit of Chakmah, wisdom, he was prescribed the spirit of understanding and also of knowledge, so that he could be discerning, knowing right from wrong. As I have said and written on a number of occasions, real discernment is not just knowing right from wrong, it's knowing almost right from totally right. You see, in addition, the Choter was offered the spirit of reverence for Yahweh. He would never change God's name. He introduced God's name. He was the one who recognized that the proper pronunciation was God's name is Yahweh, not Yahweh, or Yahweh, so that you can create this myth of a dual personality and two gods, a mommy and a daddy. And of course, serving as the final Ruach ascribed to the author of the Nesh, we find that this respect for Yahweh is imbued into the Choter. As a result, he would be the one who would reintroduce Yahweh to his people, telling them the truth about their God. Not to say they want to hear it. I posted on X today, said the fastest way to lose followers on X is tell them the truth. Yahweh had a lot to say regarding the overall disregard and disdain God's implement would suffer at the hands of those who would oppose him, something that he must endure so that he can speak with passion about what Israel has done to Yahweh. This is especially true of those who would disrespect the wise woman who shares her home with him. Now, my wife has been the object of ire. Those who have rebelled against me have chosen to slander, just as Miriam did with Moshe's wife, when she was rebuked and ostracized for claiming to speak for God. Therefore, this remains an auspicious and highly prophetic beginning to Dod's ode to the Choter. I went about incorporating this first half a dozen or so verses of Dod's presentation of the Choter. Back at a time, I don't even think I knew that Dode wrote it. I was unfamiliar that Dode had written the Mashal. Back at a time when there hadn't been such a rebellion, just to understand the only other use of Choter in the entire prophets and Torah and Mizmor. But there would have been no reason at that time to be able to put all the pieces together and understand how it is indeed prophetic. Part of this is, and we're going to come across in future programs as we go through this material, where it's just flat out profound, how it's all there. And until you've built up that base of knowledge where you know exactly what God's trying to accomplish, with whom, where, and when, you're not in a position to deduce all of this, but we are now. So my wife is not only a Yehud, she's Jewish, but as I have shared, she is a particularly wise one. How we met, we were intellectually bonded. We exchanged studious emails once a week on Torah topics for 10 years before we met. 10 years before I even saw a picture of her. The first indication I had if she was young, old, fat, skinny, tall, short, was that she wrote that she had business in Florida, and that I was in South Florida. She says, so while I'm there, I'd love to have lunch with you. Let's just meet for lunch. I said, sure. You're driving in, flying in. I'll be flying in to Fort Lauderdale. I said, great. I'll come pick you up. We'll go have lunch. He says, I've got a place all picked out that I'll be staying at. I booked my reservation there. We'll have lunch, and that'll be great. And I said, great. So if I go to the airport, how am I going to recognize you? I have no idea what you look like. So this had really been just a simple, cerebral relationship. And so she sent me a thumbnail, literally a thumbnail, it's about that big, really blurred from about 20 feet away, so that she, kind of looked like, the tip of a toothpick right there. Saying, okay, well, that helps a lot. I'm assuming that's female, but that's about all you could tell. And that's all I knew. In fact, it was Asher that actually introduced us. Asher was about 8 weeks old at the time, and I had done a number of programs that said I had just picked up a dog that I named Asher, because it's the word that really brought me into translating Yahweh's testimony years ago. And I said, so I'm sitting there, and I had been separated for a year at that point, and so not in a really loveless and a marriage without any affection. I was busy dating. Was you? Yeah. Well, she says very busy. I was very busy dating. I was pretty good at dating. I enjoyed dating, and so I had somebody who had brought some things into my home, and turns out women are kind of funny in a way that not all of them, but many of them, when they're pursuing you, boy, they are really accommodating. Everything you could project on them that's favorable, it's there. But if you give this indication that maybe you're going to be the one, well, things change. And this woman really did change. And so I was doing everything I could to get her disengaged from my life. I didn't want to go down that path again. And so I'm sitting there on a park bench, and this woman is texting me. So she's at my house and doing what I had asked, moving her things out. And I'm, this is really good. And I'm all busy texting her to make sure that she only takes her things out of my house. And Leah walks up. I don't know what she looks like. And she starts talking to Asher and calls Asher by name. And I said, well, then Asher, you have officially introduced me to our person. And I said, boy, I never thought you were going to be this rude. Here you are. I show up for lunch. I fly down to South Florida. Sure, it's for business, but are you gonna stay there and text on your phone all day? She didn't say that, but that was kind of the implication. Well, I was just ecstatic. Relationships are much easier to start than they are to end. And so I was really happy about the whole thing. And of course, I was doing my normal texting because I have a standard way of ending every relationship. It's I think you're a wonderful person. We've had a great time together. I wish you all the best. And no matter what the answer is to that, it's repeat. I think you're a wonderful person. We've had a great time together, and I wish you all the best. So, rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat. And so that's what I was doing. And there she is petting Asher. Yeah. So my wife is a Yehud. We now, we exchanged all these students, serious emails. She's actually the one that picked out Wookie too. Wookie was an import from East Texas. Wookie has definitely upgraded his digs. She thought Wookie was a handsome rascal in his puppy pictures, and well, he turned out to be the rascal part that's for sure. So, so was a meeting of the minds. As I've said many times, ours was literally an arranged marriage. One that a devious woman now has used to assail my credibility and to pretend that she can wear me like she's a skin, like I'm a skin, just copying and counterfeiting everything. And as well, did her counterparts, Miriam and Aaron, to Moshe, as recorded in Numbers 12. So, should this, and they went much, much further, of course. Now, although we don't really know what what Aaron and Miriam were talking among others before they came up to disparage Moshe's wife. So it may be a very similar situation. Likely is. People don't just catch plots like this, and the first time they think about them, they go and carry them out. Now, there was lots of rebellion and bitterness. That was the nature of the children of Israel anyway. They turned on Moshe constantly. It reflects the nature of really the whole group, as it did in my case. So should this rebellion by a woman who falsely claims that she also speaks for God be disturbing to you, I would encourage the opposite response. Human families are typically fractured. And so we should expect the same with many of those seeking the prestige and the benefits of the covenant. This is why the Torah prophetically presents the embittered rebellion against Moshe in this manner, for arming the Choter so that he knows how to handle the situation and use it as a teaching opportunity to expose and condemn the foolishness and the quarrelsome individual trying to tear it down with her own hands. This is serious stuff. God had a test for Abraham and Yishak. God's very clear about this. You have to be genuine. You have to be committed. You've got to stay the course. You've got to contribute. You're going to be part of his family. And you certainly can't be working for the other team. No. So this leads us to the intent of the Choter. It will be the concluding passage of this program. We'll resume with it on our next program, but it reads, against the mouths and pronouncements of the stupidly stubborn and corrupt, of the evil, of the simpletons, who beguiles a group of idiots who fail to comprehend, of the ignorant and irrational who are mocking the truth by promoting deceptions, of the argumentative and licentious who are averse to understanding, as well as the unethical, whether they part of this group or governments or other institutions. Against all of that verbosity, a Choter exists as a rod of divine judgment. He is a stem off the main branch and a productive sucker from the fallen trunk. And he will rise, and he will roar, and he will triumphantly oppose those who are agitating. He will rise to become a highly valued and excellent counterbalance, an effective influence, performing well on behalf of the Almighty. Gar Awuth is actually a more flattering term than I've translated it there in this reading to you. It's difficult to say it the way that it actually is written. And so the language of the one who learns, of the one who comes to understand, and then who teaches, will focus on what he has observed. Mashal Word Pictures 14:3. This is the first introduction of a Choter. And he exists to oppose the mouths and the pronouncements of those who are stupidly stubborn and corrupt, the simpletons who beguile, this group of idiots who fail to comprehend, the ignorant and irrational that mock the truth. You know what he's speaking about? overall, the Choter's purpose is to oppose Christians, the practitioners of Judaism and Islam, and progressives, all of whom would deny Yahweh's name and Dod's role in our lives. The idiots, and you have to be an idiot. I'm going to tell you, having written now there's 13 volumes that disprove Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, it is so obvious that they're false. There are 1,000 proofs that they're false. There's nothing that gives them any credibility. And so Dode is saying here, the Choter's job is to do what no one has done, to completely impugn the stupidity and the stubbornness of his people as they have created these religions, as well as the idiocy of this rebellion. And that rebellion embodies the very rebellion of Israel. That is what the Choter is here for. He is in oppositions to the mouths and the pronouncements of the stupid and the stubborn, the simpletons who are corrupt. And he is a Choter. We found out as we read up to the presentation of the Choter in the second half of the 10th chapter of Yashaya that he is presented as the rod of divine justice. Boy, that is not somebody that you'd want to go against. If this guy that you're now pretending to wear like a skin is actually bequeathed by God with the responsibility of being the rod of divine justice, in addition to being the stem off the main branch that provides productive life, that he's the one who fills the harvest, Shabuah and Teruah, but he is also the one who lops off and cuts away those who don't belong. That's a really stupid mistake. That's why he calls them stupid. Dode's a bright guy, and bright people don't suffer fools well. And it says here, absolutely, he will rise and he will roar. He is going to be triumphant and he's going to be agitating. He is going to serve as opposition to all of that nonsense. I think I'm fulfilling that role pretty well. Mm-hmm. Why, Dode came to my defense. I might have all manner of faults and failures, as did my king. But when it comes to what matters, we've got what it takes. And so the language of the one who learns, who comes to understand, and then teaches will focus on what he observes. And this is exactly the case. Yahweh did not deploy me as a prophet. It wasn't about data dump. Speak in one ear, communicate out the mouth. From brain to fingers on the keyboard. No. It wouldn't be that way at all. It was all about learning. It was about language. It was about coming to understand, studying all of this material. And it's not really until you have this huge foundation of knowledge and have made so many connections to understand it and share profound insights that finally you're in a position to take a text and wait till we talk about what comes tomorrow in this text. And so that you can say, oh my God, this is what he's talking about. And you can celebrate it and share it and appreciate it and comprehend it. Learn it and then instruct it. That is the purpose of all of those spiritual gifts given to the Choter, of Chakmah, of strategic intelligence, the ability to deduce right from wrong, of understanding, making the connections to comprehend, of putting the whole puzzle together from beginning to end so you can see the entire picture, which no one else has done before, of being bold in the proclamations, of having more knowledge about not only about the things of God, but the things that are opposed to God of anybody else, and of coming to respect Yahweh and revere him as a result of these things, all based upon what he observes, not just in the Torah, not just in the prophets, not just in the Mizmor, but what he was able to observe in religions like Christianity and Judaism and Islam. No one knows them better, understands them better. Or in progressive politics, or amongst the MAGAites, or amongst the conspirators, or in the news today to say, this is the fulfillment of these prophecies. This, based upon what is happening, based upon what we've heard the prophet says, this is where this is leading. No one has ever done that before, till now. So I thank you for listening. This is an emotional experience for me, a cerebral experience for me. I hope it is for you. This is who we are. It's who I am. It's what we're doing together. And it's of vital importance to our King. And if it's of vital importance to Dode as our King, as our Savior, as the Son of God, I can tell you it's of vital importance to Yahweh, which is why he imbued Yahweh, imbued the Choter, Yada, with his 7 spirits. I thank you for listening. I look forward to returning to this text tomorrow.